Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here. My guest today is Suraya Hossain from Malika. Hi, Suraya. We actually started talking more intently on Instagram over your temperature blanket.
Yeah.
So last year you did the temperature blanket, and this year you decided to do a temperature wrap. Why did you decide to do this project? Like, why is it important to you to talk about climate change?
Well, first of all, let me tell the viewers that who I am. I'm Suraya. I'm essentially a jewellery designer, so that's my background, and I make textile jewellery, this sort of thing. So they probably know me through that, but I'm actually a very avid knitter. I think I was a knitter before anything else. And that's always been my passion, to knit, and more recently to crochet. I think the blanket you're referring to is a crochet project. But I think, like everyone, when COVID hit, it was very difficult to deal with. I think people were having to cope in their own ways of dealing with the feeling of anxiety, the isolation that people feel, and trying to adopt coping mechanisms to deal with the uncertainty, because nobody really knew how things were going to progress, whether things were going to get better. And I think within the year before I did my blanket, the year before that, I was watching people doing these temperature blankets. And a lot of it was very therapeutic. They were saying, I didn't know when I started this blanket in January 2020 that we would be hit with this major pandemic. But this blanket is keeping me going. So a lot of that really struck with me and resonated with me. And I thought, maybe I'll do one next year, because I think I need something like that. I need something that's going to ground me every day, something that I know, like, this is something I have to do every day. But also it's a way of recording data. So, I've always been very interested in trying to highlight and raise awareness of climate change. My children as well, my children are very into, how we can do things to reduce the effects of climate change, and, being aware of all the problems that we're facing at the moment as a planet. And so it was a way of recording data as well. So the blanket that you referred to, I started in 2021, and it's a mosaic crochet blanket, which was a new technique to me. I'd never tried it before, but it was the only sort of, because I'm not really a crocheter. I think I am essentially a knitter. I would define myself as a knitter, and it was a new technique to me, but I thought it was interesting enough to sustain my interest for a whole year, because obviously it's a very big commitment to do this project for a whole year.
I actually have a question about that. So when you asked me to test knit for you this year for the temperature wrap,
yeah,
I was hesitant a little bit, because it's like a whole year commitment. And technically, like, if you think about it, right, you can just write the pattern for all the stitches, and you can test it with like single yarn in like 1-2 months, right? You don't have to do it the whole thing, like every color. Like, was that a consideration for you? Like, did you wanted that community experience of like going together through the whole year, putting the group of
I mean, initially, I had the idea that I wouldn't do a test knit as such. I would release the stitch pattern for that month online, and then I would have a whole community build up, that we would all be doing it together. And it would be one huge support network of people. But then when I thought about it in practical terms, there would be more problems, really, because you'd come across a problem with a mistake in the pattern that you think, I could have, why didn't I foresee that? And I thought, in hindsight, maybe it's best that I test knit it. But I think it helps to do it over a longer period. You can do like a tiny sample piece maybe, and be able to write the pattern quicker. But I just thought it would be nice. And I think the people that have participated in this test knit are also finding it a good journey for them. And it's building a rapport between us that you get a lot out of it. It's something that you can, it's a comfort thing at the end of the day, you know.
I mean, to me, it's like very interesting project just because, first of all, I get to use gazillion different colors, right? Because,
Yeah.
and it's the whole unpredictability of it also, because
Exactly.
you don't really know what the temperatures are going to be this year. So you have to go from like the lowest possible that like ever been recorded to like the highest possible. And then how you, so it's like there is a lot of yourself that you put into this project. It's like none of it are rigid rules and like this is how you do it. Like a lot of variations there.
And I think you're going to get a lot of results from people just in terms of their individual choice on colors and how they want to set their range of temperatures and which yarns to use for those temperatures. So that's the temperature blanket that I did last year. It's huge. I mean, I won't be able to spread it all out, but for this, I think I used a yarn color for every single degree centigrade, which creates this really lovely, you know, multi-color effect. I think if you use colors that span over a range of temperatures, you get more banding within a project, whereas this is more, you know, it is quite something for the eyes to.
I don't even know about that, because I found like if you look at mine, it's it's not very bendy either, because somehow like we had every day there was a different temperature this year. Like it's almost like frustrating at times, because it's like by 1 degree outside of that range, because I broke it into 3 degrees in Fahrenheit. So every 3 degrees is a different color, and somehow it's always like misses it by 1 degree. So I have to cut the yarn and like get a new one. So it's like interesting. Well, let's talk about your knitting going back, right? You started as a young child, right?
Yeah, I started, we were actually taught at school. So I'm originally from Bangladesh. I was born in London. So my parents came over to the UK as immigrants in the early 50s, early 60s. And I was born in London in the UK, and went to a Church of England school. And we were actually taught a lot of these skills. So we were taught to knit and sew, not crochet, but we were given projects to do as young as 7. So I think it was in year 2, the equivalent of year 2, infants. We were taught to knit, and that's where I learned. And I always had something. I think the first thing I did was, I think I knitted a teddy bear, which was quite ambitious for a 7-year-old. But I had a teacher, a lovely teacher called Mrs. Orchard, who sort of took me in hand. She could see that I had a really deep interest for this, and she helped me through creating this little teddy bear. I don't have it yet anymore, unfortunately, but from then I've always had something on the go. You know, it's throughout school, you know, I would always have either a knitting project or a tapestry project. I used to love doing tapestries as well. Just working with color, I think that was the thing that excited me, was to work with different threads and colors and things. So, you know, I've always knitted. And I now, when I look back, I think I would have loved to have done a textiles degree or something within that field, but I didn't. And because, you know, being of South Asian descent, our parents were very ambitious for us. And, you know, the thing was, yes, you must be educated and you must get a profession. You must do something that's going to give you a good profession. And so I studied law at university, and I got my law degree, and I, you know, qualified as a lawyer, and I ended up practicing for a few years. But behind all of that, I always had something happening with the knitting, but it was never anything professional. You know, it was always, I think as a student, actually, when I was at university, I would, this was, you're talking the late 80s, when hand knitted fashion was very in. You had Kay Fassett, Sasha Kagan, I think it was, Patricia Roberts. It was all on the fashion scene at the time that people wanted these hand knitted sweaters. And I think in Covent Garden there was a shop there that everybody bought these hand knitted sweaters from. And so all the sort of knitting shops around the area would try and offer a hand knitted sweater service. And as a student, I think I did for a while knit sweaters for people. We would be paid a pittance, you know, it was sort of, we paid £10 a garment. I think it was something ridiculous like that. But I mean, that's what I did as a student. Yeah, and then
how did you approach like your knitting, right? Because you are like, again, back to the ambitious parents and education and all of that. Were you an ambitious knitter as well? Like, did you want to learn every technique under the earth? Like, did you want to...
probably. I mean, I was doing intarsia way back then as well. And I think recently I put something on my personal Instagram where I found this cardigan I'd knitted years ago.
That. Yeah, the white with the flowers.
Yeah, it was in cotton.
Beautiful.
And I questioned my choice of yarn at that, for that time, because cotton isn't good for, it drops, it stretches, it's not the greatest yarn to use. But I knitted this cardigan in, as I say, when I was at university, I think, and it was all intarsia. I did charts, I designed and shaped the whole thing, and I just had and if I wanted to knit something, it would have to be very complicated and from charts. So when I looked for books or patterns, it was sort of Kay Fassett, anything that was a bit more complicated that would keep my interest. I didn't like sort of lots of plain stockinette or all that sort of thing. That didn't interest me. It had to be something a bit more challenging.
Well, you mentioned your jewelry design. How do you perceive your knitting now? Like, is that a side hobby of your jewelry design? Like, do you see the jewelry design as your profession and the knitting as your hobby?
Well, the jewelry making sort of, it's grown organically, I think, from my love of knitting. And it was a hobby to begin with. I got married and I had 4 children. And as you know, as a mother, you're at home, you're going a bit stir crazy, your brain needs something to work on. And I was looking at all sorts of hobbies that I could take up, and jewelry making was one of them. And initially it started just as a hobby, and I was doing the traditional sort of jewelry making, beadwork, a bit of silversmithing, a bit of sort of precious metal clay, that sort of thing. And then I came across some wire, and it was wire sold by, I think it was an American company, and it was designed to be used in a tool called the wire knitting tool. I've never seen this tool. I don't know what it looks like, I think it's probably a bit like French braiding, where you create a tube of wire. And that's when I thought, let me see if I can use just normal needles to knit with this wire. And it just started from there. And it has been a very organic process. But I see it going hand in hand with my knitting. I think one has informed the other. The love of knitting has made me transfer it to this hobby that I discovered. And it's just evolved from there. And I think because I'm using materials that are unusual, I use sort of the hand dyed yarns as well. So you get, I make this sort of thing that's it's like mixed media, using knitting and crochet. And then, this sort of thing that I'm wearing here. And then I make sort of elaborate pieces like this. I'll show you.
I love this necklace. I was like yesterday admiring it with the...
And this is all knitted. This is knitted from one side, and then you come to here and you increase and you decrease and you add all the crystal, and then you go along. It's a very time-consuming process. It's not, and that's how it looks on. But it is all knitting, and it's doing what I love, but also creating something that's unusual. It's I don't think there are many people that do this as a,
Yeah, I haven't seen much of
as, no, as a craft or as a skill or as a practice.
Right. Well, let me ask you about that. So you do simpler things like stitch markers or like progress markers. You also do like simpler chokers and you know, something that takes like, it looks very pretty, it looks very delicate, but it takes much less time than something like that beautiful necklace you just showed, right? Do you feel like being in business, having that as your business, does that limit your artistic freedom in a sense? Because you can make so many stitch markers or so many like little pendants, right? Or you can make like one elaborate necklace that's gonna take you maybe like months to even come up with the design. Like, do you feel like it's like you have this conflict of artist versus businesswoman?
Yeah, I think sometimes that can happen. I think when I try to keep a balance, I try to carve some time out for myself to be able to design, because that's where the enthusiasm, that's where all the joy and the love comes from, is to design sort of one-off pieces that you can then add to a collection and then, you know, maybe remake. Sometimes when it comes to, say, when you're the run up to the Christmas season, everybody wants jewelry. It can become quite laborious, and you know, it's sort of you feel like you're on a production line sometimes where you're churning out one after the other. But what I try and do is limit the number of pieces I have per design that I list, so that, you know, if I list, say, 10 of one design and people buy it, I don't then think I have to keep making that same design over and over. I will then say, well, that's happened, that's now discontinued, we're doing a new design. So that keeps some of my interest going. But I also do a lot of private commission work, and I try and save time for that as well. So I have a lot of clients who will regularly buy to match an outfit, or they have an event. And that is really, I love doing that sort of work, because, but it is very time consuming. I have to carve out, as I say, carve out time to dedicate to doing a commission piece, because that, you know, I love doing those sort of things, and I wouldn't want to give up doing that sort of thing as opposed to making like thousands of stitch markers. I mean, stitch markers are great, and it's good for the business, and you know, there is a certain love in making those, and I love putting the colors together with the sets that I create. But again, the artistic input that you have into that is limited. So
you want to work on commissions, because you have to like sort of pick the brain of your client and see the exact vision that they have? Or do you, like, when you work with clients, how much freedom do you give them, or how much of it is just like, I'm gonna surprise you and you're gonna love it?
I try to work in tandem, so that the one thing I don't want is for them to be disappointed at the end of the day. I want them to be happy with what they receive. And a lot of it is to do with, you know, their vision of what they want. So I try to work very closely with, you know, what colors they want, what shape they want. You know, there are a few that will say, look, I trust you, whatever you come up with, you know, I'll be happy with. And that's a nice feeling for me, because I don't feel that I need to meet the brief, you know, specifically. But more often than not, I will try and work to their brief, so that they're happy with it at the end of the day. And I can sort of gauge from the client, you know, what style they prefer and what they would like, and not go too sort of outside the box with it. But I do love doing that sort of work, and it keeps my you know, creative juices flowing, really, to do that.
Is there like ever a day when you wake up and you're like, I just don't feel like doing this today or tomorrow? Like, does that happen, or you like always enthusiastic about doing something? And
it can happen, I won't lie. You can wake up and think, you know, I'd love to just have a regular paid job that I know that at the end of the month I'm going to be getting a certain amount of income. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to promote it. I don't have to, you know, be churning out ideas constantly, you know, all that sort of thing. Sometimes you do, but then I then reflect and I think, well, actually, I think I'd be lost if I didn't have, you know, all this stuff behind me and all this stuff to work from every day. It has become part of my, you know, my identity in a way, that, you know, I'm known now for creating this sort of jewelry, and I don't think, you know, it's like I'd be losing another limb if I gave it up. So when I have those moments of doubt and, oh, what am I doing with my life? You know, why have I got myself into this, you know, when I have those sort of doubts, I think, no, you know, on reflection, it's what I love doing. You know, I do love creating. When there's not the pressure to be churning out pieces, it is something I love doing, and I have to hold on to, you know, that enthusiasm.
Well, you mentioned about the expectations of your parents, like to get education, to have a profession that basically guarantees you income. Did you ever feel like you're disappointing people around you, that they don't understand you, like why you're becoming an artist where you could have been an attorney? Like, is that part of your everyday dealing with the society around you?
You know, it's a lot of work when you do study and you go to university and you do years of study. I mean, in medicine and law, they're the longest, I think, and possibly architecture. You know, you have to put in like 6-7 years of study to get to that point. And you think, you know, sometimes you think, I need to make use of all those years of study and the money I've paid to get this degree and everything else. But for me, at the end of the day, I don't think I enjoyed it. I don't think it was my passion. I was good at what I did. You know, I got a job straight away. I was working, you know, I went to court. I did all those things. I could do what was expected of me, but the passion wasn't there, and I didn't enjoy. I would find it a chore to go to work. And then when I had my children, it was sort of the break I needed to really decide, you know, is this really what I want to do with my life? I think there maybe, my family haven't said it, but you know, maybe they may think you could have been earning, you know, whatever as a lawyer at this point. You've given all of that up, but I actually think I'm a happier person because of it. And yeah,
do you like wake up and you feel happy? Like, is that a happy place for you, or do you feel like it just at some point it turns out to be another kind of pressure and another kind of like grinding?
I think you have to always remind yourself of what it could be. You know, it could be that you have the pressure of clients who are, you know, who have a court case coming up. I mean, I actually worked in local government. So I worked as a government lawyer, which was in itself had its pressures. I was dealing with children who were being abused. I was dealing with education where, you know, it was all the things that come up within local government. And I would say it was more pressured in terms of a legal job. So I have to remind myself, you know, would I be rather doing that, or would I be rather doing what I'm doing now? And it's 100% I would rather be doing what I do now.
Right. So at some point you came up with the idea of creating kits for your jewelry and teaching through kits people how to make it.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy the teaching part of it?
So the teaching part of it, as with everything attached to COVID, it's had a knock-on effect on the kits and the teaching. So with my years of practice and working with different gauges of wires and stuff like that, I found the perfect wire that I could teach with. I mean, I use different thicknesses of wire in my jewelry making, but when it comes to teaching, there's a certain pliability to one of the gauges that works perfectly. And I was using those to create kits, and I did a few workshops. But when COVID struck, I had problems with supply of that wire. So now I have to rethink what I do with the whole teaching and workshops and the selling and creating of kits, because it's not easy to get the supplies anymore, which is a real shame. It's one of the knock-on effects of you know, the supplies and COVID and having to rethink what they sell and supply. But the teaching, I mean, I am doing some teaching workshops this year. I think with the supplies I have left, I'll be doing a few, but I have to rethink that whole thing in terms of whether I can actually supply the materials to make these kits up and to do the workshops.
Tell me a little bit about the whole marketing side of your business. Like, was that a whole different animal to learn, like to figure out how to market yourself?
Oh my gosh. They say, like, you go on business courses and they say, yeah, you know, this is how you must apportion your week in terms of running a business. You know, you've got to, the product is actually, the less you spend less time on the actual making of a product, and it's more about the marketing. So you know, you have to be on Instagram, you have to be on TikTok is the next thing that you have to be on, so my children tell me, and it does consume a lot of your, I mean, even taking photographs and doing the editing, and you know, I mean, it takes up a lot of hours. I mean, in a day, what I try and do is I'll dedicate maybe the morning to making, because that's when I'm fresh and that's when my concentration is there. And then after lunch, maybe I'll think, right now, let's take some photographs. Let's now think how let's get the content for my Instagram page and for my website. So it is never ending. Sometimes it's hard to switch off because you can be doing the marketing side of stuff in the evenings before you go to sleep. It really is difficult sometimes to know, when to switch off, but marketing is definitely one huge chunk, I'd say.
Well, let's talk about your family. So the children, right? Are they surprised at you that like mom is doing all this, like mom is being on Instagram, mom is talking about TikTok, mom is doing marketing? Like, how do they perceive you? Are they supportive? Are they rolling
Very
their
supportive?
eyes?
Yeah. I mean, they've grown up with it. So, I was a stay-at-home mom whilst I was having these, baby after baby. I have 4 children. And then when the oldest was about 15, I went through a divorce. It was a very traumatic time for us as a family. And I think that's what spurred me on to start the business. So they have actually, and from that time, I've just been, just concentrating on trying to get this business off the ground, just to have, an income, a career and everything else to provide for the family. And so they've grown up with it, and they don't, it's not a wow thing for them. There's, oh yeah, mom's making, oh yeah, she's just in her corner making, this stuff. And they actually tell me what I need to be doing. Like, you need to be on Instagram, you need to be putting this sort of stuff on Instagram. My youngest son, he's finishing his degree in product design, and he's at Central St. Martin's School, which is it's an art university which is very well known in London. And he's constantly giving me, well, he and his brothers and sister, they're constantly giving me advice on, right, you need to change your feed, mom, it's not looking professional enough, you need to be doing, right, give me control of your Instagram, I want to delete this and this and this, and you need to be showing it like, it needs
you want to take a pic of my Instagram? Let him. I would love that.
It's really scary because they say, right, you've got to trust me and you've got to let me take. They haven't as yet, but that's, they threaten to do that because I want to have their perspective, because my target audience isn't just the knitting community, you know, because it's jewelry. Sometimes the knitting community don't really understand where I'm at, you know, where I fit in. And I'm sort of on the fringes. I don't know if you've seen, I've been around a long time. I've been doing this for over 10 years. And I started at the mainstream knitting shows. I mean, I was there every year with a stand. So I've been around a long time, but on Instagram, I only have about 4,000 followers or something like that. It's quite small, considering how long I've been doing it. So I am sort of on the fringes. People, if they know about me, they love me, they buy the stuff, but I'm not sort of, because I'm not a knitwear designer, say, or someone who's definitely, you know, a yarn dyer or, you know, all that sort of thing in the knitting industry. I'm not so, even I sometimes think, where do I fit in, you know? So I have the audiences outside of the knitting community as well. So the younger crowd, I want to attract more of that, really, you know, because I think it does, you know, it does go into that as well.
One of the people I interviewed on my channel was Carol Milne, and she does knitting with glass.
No, yes.
So why can't you knit with wire? Like, I absolutely think you're still one of us. But yeah, I mean, I see how it's like, it can attract like all different kinds of people. And I think like knitters would find it fascinating, or crochet people, they would find it fascinating just to like understand how you do it. Whereas for anybody else, they just love the look.
They love the finished.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, Carol, I saw her work at VKL in 2020. That was the last show I went to, actually, in New York. And I saw her work there. She had it on display. I mean, I've admired her work for years. I don't know how she's done it. I'll have to watch the interview over that you did with her.
It's so lovely. I really liked talking to her.
Yeah.
And she's a great knitter as well. So
yeah.
Well, I mean, what's the actual knitting for you? Like, how do you find time in your schedule? You have all your like time when you spend with the family, the time when you cook that food. And I want to talk about the food that you make, because it's part of your Instagram feed. And I'm always drooling over all the recipes you're sharing. And then you have your jewelry making, which is like the bread and butter, basically. How do you find time for personal knitting?
It's in the evenings, you know, so I will switch off at, say, 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock is the cut-off time for any of the jewelry stuff. And then, you know, it's meal time, we have dinner and what have you. And then it's sort of the evenings are for knitting. But as you know, I'm spending my evenings designing the climate wrap and all sorts of other things. I mean, I have, you know, maybe about 5 or 6 other design projects on the go, which I do in the evenings. So I mean, this is the climate wrap. I have 3 different versions. So, you know, you showed me
mine is in fingering, but you also
mine is in fingering too. So that's one of the versions. And then I have a mild like DK version here, you see there, and then another one which, and I do this in the evening, so that's just the simple wrap, again in fingering, but it's all just of different colorways. I also have another thing, I think it's called a capelet that I'm designing with lots of crystal going through. So I mean, I don't know if you can see with this jumper I'm wearing, I put crystal in absolutely everything. And I'm putting crystal in the temperature projects as well.
Okay. Well, talking about putting crystals and everything, so there is this outfit that you created for a fashion show with the skirt and the top. Absolutely spectacular.
there. Did you see that? Did you go to
I saw it somewhere on the internet. Yeah, I saw I saw the model walking there, and
yeah,
like beautiful.
yeah.
Is that like a plan for the future? Are you thinking in terms of like other fashion shows, other outfits that you're gonna create with?
I would love to. I think that's why I sit there in the evenings and I want to create something that's a garment, or I mean that outfit, the original skirt was produced for an exhibition, and it was a collaborative exhibition with 2 other textile artists. So it was more for an exhibition piece outside of my jewelry making. But the idea of the exhibition was that we would have a common practice or a common process. And we had a rug maker, like a textile designer, and the other artist was a needlepoint or tapestry designer. And we're all using stitch as the common process, and it's like the common thread, as it were. So I produced that skirt out of knitted wire for that exhibition. And I just loved the whole process of it. I loved the fact that we were coming together as a joint collaborative, team, and it could introduce people to like the different techniques that the common stitch produces, and I did the skirt for that exhibition. And then when the competition came up for VKL, for the Kaleidoscope fashion show, I think it was Brooklyn Boy Knits put this thing out. I applied for it because I thought, the whole thing is about knitting with different things, different materials. And some friends of mine said, oh, your skirt is definitely up there it would qualify as something that's knitted with different, because it was predominantly, I mean, it's from yarn and wire, but predominantly it was knitting wire. It took me 4 months to make. And so I applied for that show, and I got into, I was a finalist at the end, and I produced a top to go with it. But I would love, if I had the time, I would do that full time. I think if given the choice, I would do exhibition work full time, because I just love that the slow process, the mindful, like you're doing something over a long time to be exhibited, because there's so much of your energy that's gone into that, that whole thing. I would love to do that full time. If someone would pay me and sponsor me to do it, I would do that. And, the jewelry would sort of have to take a sidestep.
Maybe I should talk to Louis and see if he has some ideas about it.
I mean, for that show, we only had 2 or 3 months to prepare, if that. It didn't give a lot of time to come up with lots of pieces. So really, you need like to be working a year in advance for something, to produce sort of quality pieces to be exhibited. But yeah.
Well, I want to ask you about collaborating with other people, with other designers and stuff. So the very first time I saw your piece of jewelry was when Julie Knits in Paris designed a cape, and she had that beautiful brooch that was holding it. And I was one of the testers for that cape.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how and this is actually another test that I just recently finished for Julie Knits in Paris also. It's called Bubbly Shawl. So if you guys want to knit it, really love that one. And you can get the pin holder, the shawl holder from Suraya. Do you love the collaboration with other designers? Like, what does it give you? Like, why?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I just love Julie. Bless her. She's supported me from day one. I think she discovered me initially through the Edinburgh Yarn Festival, and that's when we first met. And she's commissioned me to make stuff for her ever since. And that the shawl, the pin that went with her, I can't remember, what's the name of that shawl that she designed? Oh, I can't remember.
I'll put it in the notes.
So initially what the idea was that we would be going to the Barcelona Yarn Festival together, and I would design this brooch thing, and it would all get sold. But, there's always problems with Europe and selling and all the rest of it. So it didn't quite work out how we envisaged, but obviously I have that. It was designed in collaboration with her shawl. And I've done other things as well with, so I don't know if people remember Countess Ablaze, a yarn dyer. She's now no longer dyeing. I mean, I collaborated with her to bring my collection to the Edinburgh Yarn Festival. So she specially dyed yarn for me to use in that collection. It was a thistle collection in keeping with the national flower of Scotland. And I do lots of other collaborations with yarn dyers who, say, with their advent calendars, or if they're having some sort of special project that they want to promote and they want to give a special gift. I think I've done stuff for BIPOC in Fibre as well. And it's nice to work with I prefer to work with other people rather than be working on my own all the time. I think it just gives you a different way of, a bit of a community feel to your work, and it introduces other people to you, because their followers and their people who know them will then get to know you, so it's a win-win to be collaborating. I'd like to do that, more of that as well.
Right, because like this temperature blanket that I'm doing this, all the yarn came from Advent from Inspired Fiber Works.
Yeah.
Ronnie was one of the Fiberchats stars. She was like one of the first people I interviewed. And it was the first Advent I actually bought. And I was thinking, it's such a perfect thing to use for projects. So
yeah. How are you finding it? Are you enjoying the process?
I love it. It's like it's relaxing, and it's so ever changing. And I found the system of like putting little ice cream sticks into each of the yarn skeins to keep the to know what temperature range it is for. So it's like it's all organized nicely, and it's very.
Yeah, I mean that is another example of collaboration, right? So we have, I think in our test knitting group, we've got 3 yarn dyers.
Right.
I think, is it 3 or maybe 4? And I know one of them definitely will be bringing out a temperature range, a set of yarns for temperature products.
Right. It's actually a really good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, and because I think people are becoming more aware of, how the climate is changing, and it's, for me, just recording the temperature every day is so eye-opening, to see how, I don't know how it is in your part of the world, but it's definitely getting warmer in the UK, definitely. So the blanket that I did, which is the crochet blanket, I'm doing a climate blanket. I don't know if you saw that on Instagram, where it's a 10-year project that I'm doing as well. I've got the strips, where you have strips for each year. Is it that way up? Yeah. So beautiful. I'm doing a strip for each year, and you can actually have a direct comparison then of.
Oh, that's very clever. Yeah, because you can see it. It's like it's sort of visual representation of how it changes over 10 years.
So even this is 2000. So that's 2021, and this is 2022. But look, you've got ice and snow there, but nothing there,
Right.
It really is a very good way of depicting how things are changing over the years. And I'm excited to see in 10 years how that strip is going to look,
Hopefully we'll see some snow again there.
Who knows? I mean, I don't know.
Well, I wanted to ask you about your cooking, because it's really all over your Instagram, and I love seeing that. And some of it is like what I'm thinking is probably what your mom used to cook.
Yeah.
And then there's like Korean fried chicken.
Oh yeah.
How do you, like, what influenced you? What's comfort food for you? Like what food in general for you? Because to me, like when I'm thinking about, like, my children were writing essay for college about food in Russia and how it was all basically like based on the climate, right? On the poverty of people. So there's a lot of like root vegetables, cabbage, something that can stay over winter, something that can be preserved, a lot of preserves, a lot of jams. a lot of smoked fish and stuff like that. What's your relationship with food? Like, is that something that makes it feel like home? Do you?
So I'm from Bangladesh. Did I mention that at the beginning?
Right.
And my mum was a very good cook. She actually had her own restaurant in the early 70s in London. We lived in central London when I was growing up. And just people who know London, if they know the Tottenham Court Road, which is very central, our restaurant was sort of parallel to that road. So it was very, prime sort of position in central London. And she ran her own restaurant, and she did it single-handedly. She would cook all the dishes. She would serve all the customers. I mean, we lived in that restaurant as children. We had to stay there, So I learned a lot of stuff from her, and it was Bengali cuisine, essentially. So very light curries. So, as you know, within the Indian subcontinent, you've got so many different styles of cooking. It's not, curry isn't just one type of curry. You've got really heavy curries in the south. You've got, light curries in the Bengal region. It's very much about seafood, and it's sort of light spicing, I'd say. So I grew up eating all of that. I would eat rice was every day. We would eat rice every day, and we'd have curry every day. And we also had, some of the European stuff. So we would have spaghetti bolognese. We would have roast dinner. My mum used to do Christmas dinner every year. So we would have roast chicken and roast potatoes and all of that sort of stuff at Christmas. We'd have our own celebrations with Eid. And so we would have biryani. We would have all the fried stuff, which, the samosas. I mean, my mum used to make them all from scratch, and parathas. We used to have all of that. So it's been a nice mix growing up for me. And I'm trying to teach my own children how to cook the Asian dishes, the South Asian dishes as well. It's become a bit sort of fusion. There's a bit of fusion that goes on. I use different spices sometimes. I mean, the Korean stuff is because I have a love of Korean food, and Japanese food I love. So we have sort of a mixed, when it comes to dinner choices, or we do mix it up a bit, and I will do sort of roast, but essentially, what I grew up on was the South Asian food, and the Bengali cuisine in particular. So I always crave that. Yeah, I mean,
it's funny in a sense that like food really sort of brings you back into your childhood and keeps so much memory. Like a simple recipe can like remind you of so many different occasions.
Yeah. I mean, I really wish, and you say this like, oh, why didn't I learn more from my mum? I could have learned. There's so many things that she made that I just think I wish I could recreate that now. But she passed away in 2011, and I never got to learn all the things. She used to make a beautiful homemade yogurt, which is very distinctly, there's a special way of making it with milk and boiling the milk for hours and hours and hours, and then you would set it in the oven at a very, very low temperature. But I never learned the technique, and it was the most delicious yogurt you could ever have. And she would do that every day for the restaurant. I don't know how she did it. There were 5 of us. I'm one of 5. I have 3 brothers and a sister. How she managed to do that, I don't know.
I saw you also part of the choir. So the choir at some point put the family book of like all the recipes that everybody shared. Are you thinking of ever creating your family's recipes book?
We do have a Google document where it's the family recipe book. And I started it because the children were going off to university, and they said, look, we need to learn how to cook dal. We need to learn how to cook just a simple chicken curry, and what spices do we, so I said, look, I can't bear having to say this over and over again. I'm just going to do a Google document, and I'll just write the recipes down. So it's become the family recipe book, which I can add to.
Well,
So
I would love to be adopted by your family and see this recipe.
But they can, I said, look, don't ask me, and they'll ring me. What do I need? Don't ask me, just look at the document, you know, because I've written it all down. So they have all the basics there, and I add to it. I'm trying to add to it because I think what they're worried about is that they don't want to lose that part of, you know, the knowledge of the cultural, you know, knowledge of how to cook these things. They want to be able to preserve it because, you know, in years to come, it gets diluted, right? So you forget how to make these things, and you as I've just said, I wish I'd learned more from my mum, whereas now we can document it, we can sort of give a record of it so that people, you know, your children can at least try and recreate it from
Well,
what
you know what I'm gonna ask you next, right? Are you teaching your children how to knit jewelry?
No. I don't think any one of them have the patience or the inclination to do it, really. My youngest son, I think he might dabble in, he did a bit of jewelry making, but it was more the fine jewelry, you know, the traditional jewelry making where you work with sterling silver, and, you know, I helped him with it. You get it cast, and then you get, you know, stones set into it and all that. So he made a ring out of silver, and he's saying that he might, because he's done product design, but he's done a lot of 3D printing, and there's a lot of 3D printed jewelry that you can that's around, where you actually make the cast out of a 3D printed design, and then you cast it in precious metal. So he might go into that, but as far as the wire is concerned, I don't think I'll be, you know, passing it down to anybody, unfortunately.
Well, have you considered adding to your YouTube channel some tutorials?
I do have a YouTube channel.
I saw that.
Yeah, but I haven't put anything on there other than, I think, my Instagram videos. The idea was to do some videos, as in tutorials on it, but it's just time constraints, isn't it? You just don't have, you can't dedicate that time to doing the recording and editing and putting it out there.
Well, I'm sure that would be like hugely popular if you ever decide to do that. I'm sure people would want to see like actual tutorials. So maybe something in the future. Well, talking about the future, what's your plans for this year?
This year, I'm taking it quite easy, I'd say, you know, compared to other years. I'm only doing, I think I'm doing 2 workshops at a retreat. They're in the south of the country. They're at, you know, it's sort of a seaside resort. I'm doing 2 workshops. I haven't booked any shows. I think prior to COVID, I did everything. You know, I was on the circuit doing show after show. And I think when the pandemic hit, it was a bit of a wake-up call as to, do I really need to be doing all these things, you know, to be seen, to be visible? And I think now people are so used to seeing and buying online that, you know, you don't have to be physically present at a lot of these things. So for the moment, I'm working with on my website, and selling online has been working really well for me. And I did do 1 show in February. I did Unravel, which was a yarn festival in February. So that was my last show. And I haven't got any others planned after that one.
I mean, I'm going to put the link to your everything, your website, your Instagram, your Etsy shop, everything there. So people can find it and either buy your jewelry or buy a kit and learn how to do it.
And also the patterns, I think on Etsy and Ravelry, I have the pattern for the blankets. And I had a lot of people buy that pattern, actually, which is surprising. It's not even finished yet.
It's really beautiful though.
Yeah, the temperature blanket. I mean, it's the final version is being edited at the moment. It's being tech edited at the moment. So once that's done, that pattern will be there in its final version. So yeah, I plan to have more patterns in terms of yarn patterns on there as well.
I'm so happy you asked me to test for you. I'm really enjoying it. And I know we have another half a year to go with that. So we're going to be in touch.
Yeah. yeah, it's going to be great at the end of the year to see all the versions.
Yeah,
you
that's
know.
going to be very interesting, actually.
Yeah.
Because everybody chose different yarns and they all live in different climates. So it's going to be very
exactly.
interesting.
I would have loved to have had more people from different areas of the world, you know, but I mean, at the moment, I think it's Europe and America and Norway, other sort of areas. But maybe once the pattern's released, it will, you know, we can have, because I would, I don't know if you know Cara, who's January 1. Yeah. She's one of the test knitters as well. We were, you know, I think we did our blankets together, sort of. We were sort of supporting each other during that initial year of doing the temperature blanket. And we said, you know, we need to have a global exhibition of some sort at some point. We need to have an exhibition.
That would be a great idea, actually.
Yeah, where everybody, you know, globally, we can have a representation of their area and their piece, because there's some beautiful pieces out there.
Right. I actually like that idea. I think you should do that.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to thank you for being my guest today. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I feel like I know you forever, and hopefully we'll stay friends forever, you know.
No,
that's
definitely.
the best thing about this community.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me and for inviting me.
Thank you.